Greek temples. Just saying that gives everyone an image in their minds. Our imaginations go right to stone structures that are relatively square. They have stone steps leading up to some impressive doorway, and of course, the columns. Many columns running the perimeter with various ornamentation. Probably looks a lot like something like this. But why is it that this is so familiar to us? Is it just that we've seen pictures throughout all the history books? Or is there more to our vivid mental reconstructions of the past? The architecture of the Greeks has stood the test of time, and even now, a simple internet search can bring up endless photographs of the ruins of temples past, and as we see them now, many who came before us saw them as well. For example, the Romans. They followed shortly after the Greeks, and they built structures that borrowed from the ideas of Greek architecture. The Greek influence was heavy on many aspects of Roman culture, but all the visual evidence you need lies within the temples. And later, this influence carried on into architecture that can be found from the Renaissance and even further. But what makes a Greek temple unique? Look at the parts. First, there's the stepped foundation here. This is commonly known as the stylobate. And then there, of course, are the columns. There are 3 different distinct forms of Greek columns. Up here you have the entablature, just sort of the area just above the columns. Then you have the pediment, which is this sort of triangle area on top of the entablature. The 3 different types of columns, we have Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian. Doric, yeah, they start a little bit skinnier at the top and they get larger, and they do not have a base. The Ionic has this capital at the top that looks somewhat like a rolled up scroll. And Corinthian has this sort of more detailed capital at the top. Now, these characteristics are more familiar than perhaps we think, but I would bet that many Americans see this kind of thing just about every day. Don't believe me? Well, let's make our own then. All right. Let's make a Greek temple. Let's start out with the parts we already know. Start out with our base, or our stylobate. Then, of course, there are going to be steps leading up to there. Oop, it's a little too big. There we go. Something like that. And we'll get right into those columns because, you know, that's the part that we all are very familiar with. Make it nice and symmetrical. Just because that's how I imagine a Greek temple to be. All right. And of course, we need our entablature. And yeah, that's looking pretty good. Make that a little wider. Now, I imagine the temple, a Greek temple in my mind, to be made of stone. Let's go ahead and do that. And oh, we definitely need our top here. There we go. That's looking pretty good. That looks like a temple to me, right? Okay. Now, it's looking a bit sterile, so let's make our temple part of a scenery. Maybe there's some grass. Maybe we have a couple of trees. Something like that. And our trees some shape. Fill that in, make it look real nice. As you can tell, I am definitely a professional artist. All right. Now that's looking pretty good. I feel like I'm in ancient Greece already. But wait. This is starting to feel a little familiar. Kind of looks like the Philadelphia Museum of Art. Or something you might be a little bit more familiar with, the Lincoln Memorial. Or if you don't know this one, there's another one that is a little bit lesser known, but something called the State Capitol. Or really kind of far out there reference that maybe only a couple of you will catch on to. It's just a little building. You may have heard of it. It's called the White House. As it turns out, Greek architecture and culture has influence even closer to home than the Romans or someplace over in Europe that you've never been to. Even more modern structures have the characteristics of Greek temples, and Greek influence is everywhere you look. Most of us just spent our lives really not noticing. But perhaps this is why Greek culture and architecture doesn't seem so alien to us, and why, when asked to imagine what Greece looks like, it's really not too much of a stretch.